Matthew chapter 24. There is so much packed into this chapter. You could spend a lifetime, and still not ever, dissect all of it. But here we're going to focus on, and it almost seems like it's something that Jesus says in passing here in chapter 24. We'll take a look specifically at verse 36. We'll kind of start there, but it's just one of the things that he says, and it's just like, it's almost in passing, but then again it's not in passing, because he said it on purpose. And it's really for us to kind of dig deep and to see what he really meant. And this is really what I want to do today. And so the title of this is In the Days of Noah. So here in verse 36 he says, "But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only." So we already see that all these things that we're looking for, that we are anticipating, that we see when Jesus finds the final victory, we see all those things, but we don't know. We don't know when that hour is going to happen. We don't know the day. We don't know the season. We don't know the year. We know that when we're in it, if we're in it, or if somebody else, generations next are in it, they'll know the time frame, obviously, because of the tribulation. But of that day and hour, Jesus isn't going to just say, here's that time. That's not how it works. He wants us as individuals throughout all these years, since he started the ecclesia, to be ready at any moment. And it's not that he will come back at any moment. It's an erroneous teaching. But the fact that we don't know if we are guaranteed tomorrow. We're not guaranteed tomorrow. We don't know if we're going to have it. We need to be personally ready at every moment. And that can be really hard to do, But at the same time, that's the way that we need to live our lives, is that we need to be ready. It's like Jesse talking about his brother, he's afraid of getting older. He's afraid of, and I'm reading into that he's afraid of what happens. What to me after I die? That's a question that, that people have. And so it's a natural thing to fear the unknown. But our faith should be such, and it's not always this strong, but our faith should be such that we don't have that fear. And I know that Brother Ole did not have that fear. I talked to him several times there in the hospital, and he didn't have that fear. He wanted it. So just going back to that for a sec. But that's the thing, is that he says nobody knows, not even Jesus. If you can separate that out in your mind, he says only my Father knows. It says verse 37. And remember, if we just we're taking this snippet, but if you back up to the beginning of the chapter. This whole discussion was jump-started by the disciples' question of when will these things be? They were with him for 3 years, and it's not that they deserved to know, but man, they were curious. They wanted to know, when are you going to bring this kingdom in that you've been preaching for, or preaching about for 3 years now? And we've heard about from our ancestors. When are you going to bring this in? When are these things going to happen? It's a natural question. So he says, he's just telling them. No, first of all, nobody knows when it's actually the day that it's going to happen. But he says, but I will give you some clues. Because the earth has to come back to the time when Noah walked the earth, pre-flood. That's what the earth has to come back to before before the coming of the Son of Man. So he says, but as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. Well, what in the world does that mean? How is the time frame, pre-flood in the Noah's day? How is that going to be like the time frame that Jesus comes back in? How are those two equated? Why are those two equated? And that's what he gets into just a little bit here. He says, and we're going to chase this, here in a couple different passages. But he says, for as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark. These people didn't have a clue that this would happen. They knew what Noah was preaching, but they didn't believe it, and they didn't let it motivate them to do something about it. So what were they doing? They're going about their lives. And what do we see today? The world knows about Jesus. They know that he's coming back. They don't do anything. They don't believe it. So they're not doing anything about it. up until the day Christ comes back, this is what the earth is going to be doing. And so he says, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. It's going to be sudden. It's going to be fast. It's going to be something that hits them out of the blue. When, and I think about, in the times of Noah, they'd never seen it rain before. And all of a sudden, that one fateful day, they woke up, and there was, I don't know when it happened during the day, or wherever they were in the earth, but the earth split open and the rains just started torrential downpour, so much so that it covered the mountains, such as they were at that time. But they didn't believe that until that first raindrop hit their head. Uh-oh. What do we do now? Well, there's nothing you can do. And I dare say that people started scrambling to get into that boat. It was closed. And he said God closed it. Right? And that's it. Sealed. And this movie coming out, Noah, I'm really looking forward to it, to be honest with you. I kind of figured this might be the issue, but I'd heard that it's kind of non-scriptural. It's Hollywood. Of course it's going to be non-scriptural. What I like about it is that it gets Noah out there. It gets his name out there. It gets it gets God out there. And it gets people thinking about their lives and about this event that happened 4,000 years ago. So he says, and this is kind of, he's just more expounding on this. He says that they didn't know until the flood came and took them all away. So also will the coming of the Son of Man be. Now in this passage, from what he's saying, and he's going to expound on this, is it better to have been taken away, or is it better to have been, left behind, as it were? And this is the example he gives. Then 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and the other left. And so it's a sudden thing. They're grinding at the mill. They're going about they're trying to provide food. They're in the field. What are they doing? They're reaping the crops. It's just going to be so sudden that these people are not going to know what's coming, even though they should have known what's coming. It's just that in the days of Noah, up until the day that door closed on the ark, they didn't know. They were not preparing themselves, and they found themselves on the outside. And so he says, 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and the other left. And watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord is coming. Don't let this time come upon you like those women at the mill or those men at the field. Well, I didn't know. He's saying, forget about that whole mentality of we didn't know. Prepare yourself right now, because we do know. He's saying, be watchful. He always says that. In fact, in verse 42, watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord is coming. But know this, if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. Therefore you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour that you do not expect. And so we see here that that the hour that we're not going to know the exact hour and the exact day. But what we do know is that we need to make ourselves ready. That's why all these scriptures that say the kingdom is at hand and the night is far spent and everything, that's true in each of our lives. Because we only have this lifetime to get ready for. We don't have any other lifetime. And when that door is finally shut, then that's it. And that's something that we need to really consider. So let's examine a little bit about the days of Noah and what we do know. Let's go back to Genesis chapter 6. Kind of want to do some word studies here, and that's what really helps me out when I read something and say, well, you know what does the Strong's Concordance have to say about this? And it's kind of like reading it's the other words the translators didn't use. And in most cases, I think they got it right. Kind of like that peacock and monkey thing. I don't know what that was all about. I guess somebody just either really liked monkeys or peacocks. I don't know. It seems like that word we wouldn't use the same word for those.
I think so.
Maybe their definition of that back then was different than what we call it now. I don't know. A lot gets lost in translation hundreds of years ago. But here in Genesis chapter 6, let's just go ahead and read verses 1 through 8, and then we'll back up and take a closer look at some of these words that are key. So he says, now it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants on the earth in those days, and afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. This is our key here. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing, and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Wow, aren't you thankful for Noah in that scripture? All of humanity is turned on God, except for Noah. It makes me thankful for Noah every time I read that. And so, Jesus said, as in the days of Noah. Well, we're reading about the days of Noah. There's not a whole lot about the days of Noah, except this little passage right here. So what do we know about the days of Noah? Well, just basically what I read. Now, they made an entire movie about it. But at the same time, what we do know is that the earth was a very wicked place. And so Genesis 6, so mankind had begun to fulfill God's command to Adam and Eve. What was that command that he gave to Adam and Eve? Be fruitful and multiply. And isn't that what they were doing? But instead of worshiping God as he wanted, they went the opposite way and disobeyed every rule that he had. And so he said, be fruitful and multiply. Sure enough, they checked that off their list. That's what it says, right? It came to pass when men began to multiply that they fulfilled that command. But interlaced with that was, you have to worship me too. He doesn't just want them to grow in numerical numbers. He wants them to be faithful to him as well. And so they weren't doing that. And this word multiply, this is one of the first words we'll look at here. This word multiply carries the meaning of myriad, and to vastly multiply, not just by a little, but by tens of thousands. So we see here it says, now it came to pass when men began to multiply. So really grow in number. Really, really grow in number. Why is that important? As in the days of Noah. Our earth, I believe, is I think it's, basically my point is that as in the days of Noah, we now have a large population, just like they did back then. So we're not dealing with just like a couple people, a couple families that God wiped out. This was something that is a large amount of people, tens of thousands and tens of thousands, having tens of thousands of kids, and they have kids. So now we see the earth is just getting really populated, just like our earth today. Genesis 6:5, and so he says, then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth. And this word wickedness can also be defined as harm, misery, trouble, wretchedness, or wrong. And man's wrong and trouble was exceedingly great at this time. So you could substitute that man's wrong. God saw that man's wickedness, his wrong, his wretchedness, his trouble was great in the earth at this time. Keep in mind, Jesus said, as in the days of Noah is when he will come back. Our earth is like this even today, and it's only going to get worse. So he says, in that same scripture, he says, he saw that the wickedness was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. That word intent can also be defined as conception, purpose, or framed thought. And so whatever he's thinking is what man does. Remember, because the mind is the control center for the body. And so whatever you think about is what you do. So when God looked down at the earth at that time and saw all of mankind doing whatever they wanted, worshiping whoever they wanted, not worshiping if they chose not to, but every thought and every intent of their heart was only evil all the time. Is that going to make God sad that he made mankind in his image to be worshipped? Absolutely. So he says, the words wickedness and evil, let's take a look here in verse 5. So the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil. So if you look at those words, wickedness and evil, those are the exact same word, just translated differently. And so this shows us that because man was thinking only evil thoughts, he was also doing evil as a result. You cannot have, somebody doesn't just commit a wicked, crime, as it were, without first thinking about it. That thought has to be there. And if it's not there, 2 days prior, it could be there 2 minutes prior. But you still have thought about it before you did it. And so those words are the exact same. Here in the next verse, the word sorry. It says, and the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth. And then he was grieved in his heart. Now this was interesting. This is translated as to sigh or breathe strongly. Just a big old collective, I'm tired of it, right? Is that what he's saying? I'm sighing deeply in my spirit. Now God didn't actually do this. But the translation is such that as he has emotions, he sighed very deeply in his spirit, saying that he was very, very sorry. He's at his wit's end with mankind, and now it's time to do something about it. That word also can be translated to avenge oneself. So that's what it says. It says, and the Lord was sorry. The Lord had come to the point now where he said, I have to do something about this. And so when we're that motivated about something, and when it's upsetting us that much, we usually do something about it, right? Whether that's going and talking to somebody, whether that's praying about it, whatever the situation is, it leads us to action. And so God was so sad over his creation that it led him to action. He said, I have no other recourse but to do what? I have to flood the earth. I have to start over with Noah. And so when Jesus comes back, he has no recourse. God said, I have no recourse. I have to send my son back to put an end to what's going on. So that he said, if it's possible, that even the elect will be deceived. And he's saying that at that point, that the deception will be so out there that people will be believing it. And that if it were possible, that God's elect would believe it too. God has to put a stop to that, or else what? There would be no one out. There would be no true ones left. So he has to put a stop to it. So this brought on, this word sorry can be translated as to sigh or breathe strongly, or to avenge oneself. And God had regretted making mankind that much. So in Genesis 6, and so he says, he was sorry that he had made man and the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. What's that word grieved? The word grieved can be translated as to carve, or fabricate, or fashion. Now I don't work with, I work on computers, as you all know. I don't keyboard pretty much every time I type a key, it just pops right back up. I don't carve anything new, right? But when you're talking about working with metal or wood or whatever, you're carving something out of it to make something new. You actually have to dip into that and break parts of it out in order to make something that you want it to be, right? And I think about, just like in elementary school, taking that lump of clay, right, and you're molding it and you're shaping it and you're carving it and you're getting rid of pieces and stuff. That's what that word grieved means. It means to take a knife and to cut away at something. And God's heart was cut away at, if you could want to translate it like that, as to carve or fabricate or fashion. They took his heart and they cut it. And that caused severe emotional pain. Of course, the heart is not the physical heart, it's the emotion seat, right? It's your emotions. Somebody cut you to the heart. Isn't that what it says there in Acts? When Peter preached that message there in Acts chapter 2, it says that they were cut to the heart. As in their hearts were actually fashioned in a different way, where that caused pain, emotional pain. And so this caused God emotional pain to look down at his creation and see that they're all just running astray. Once again, he has to do something about it, as in the days of Noah. Don't you think God's sad right now, up in heaven, looking down at mankind, saying, man, what's going on? I got to put a stop to this, round 2. But except this time, it's going to be forever. So we look at the word, the very next verse. So we see here that God is sorry. He regrets making mankind. He's going to avenge himself. He's cut so deeply in his heart that in verse 7, this is what leads him to his next course of action. He says, so the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth. That word destroy can be translated as to rub, by implication to erase. Make smooth, abolish, blot out, wipe away. They say like oil, when you rub it, it becomes very smooth. He's going to wipe away mankind. He's going to rub them from the earth. He's going to make it smooth again. And so he says that he will destroy them. He will blot them out, whom he has created from the face of the earth, both man and beast. You know, and we know that our Lord is loving and that that God is love. What point did he have to get to? And what level of patience did he have with these people? We're going to see here. We're going to see in 1 Peter in just a sec what level of patience he had with those people. Well, God just wiped him out. He's mean. No, he's not mean. We're going to see that he had an enormous amount of patience during this time. And guess what? He has an enormous amount of patience with us today, too. And not only with us. Yes, he's having patience with the world. He could have ended this thing at any moment. He's choosing to let the fullness of the Gentiles come into covenant. And he's choosing to extend his mercy. So if by reason of 10 years, 15 years, 20, 100 years from now, we're still preaching the same word, it's because God has had mercy on mankind and is waiting, just as he did in the days of Noah. And so, let's go to 1 Peter chapter 3 to get more insight into the days of Noah and what our earth is going to be like. And really already is. Just going to get more so. Chapter 3, verse 18. I like that Peter, in his only 2 epistles, he references Noah twice, or his time frame twice, one in each book. I think that's wonderful, because it's a nice tie-in to the rest of it. Chapter 3, verse 18 says, "For Christ also suffered once for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive by the Spirit, by whom," this is the key here, so what he's getting at is that, and he's talking about Jesus, of course, but he's talking about when he suffered, he died. And what did he do during that time frame when he died? Did he just cease to exist? No, we never do. We're spirit. Just because you can see my body doesn't mean I don't have a spirit. We have spirits. So what did Jesus' spirit do while he was, in the ground for 3 days before he was resurrected? This is what it says. By whom, right, made alive by the Spirit, so we're talking about the Spirit, so that by the Spirit also he went and preached to the spirits in prison. Who are those? Where were those? Isn't this what the Old Testament referenced as Sheol, the land of the departed spirits? So he's talking, and he went down there into the center of the earth, where Lazarus, in that parable was. He says he went and preached to the spirits who were in prison. Now even David, I mentioned David earlier, even David said, "Lord, don't leave my soul," where? In the pit. What's the pit? Sheol. He realized that God had the power to bring him out of that pit one day, or worse yet, to leave him down there. He wanted to be brought up from the pit. So don't leave my soul there. I believe David was one of the ones that was taken, and we'll see here. By whom also he went and preached to the spirits in prison. Well, why do you care about the spirits in prison? They're in prison, right? Well, this is who they were. Who formerly were disobedient, when once the divine long-suffering, all that's talking about is how God's been patient, the divine long-suffering, waited in the days of Noah while the ark was being prepared. You mean these people had a chance to be in that boat? They could have went into the ark or helped Noah build the ark and been on board? Absolutely. God waited in the days of Noah. He waited, what does it say? Patiently in the days of Noah. Isn't he waiting patiently right now? Isn't he waiting for more people to come into the church? Isn't he waiting for people to turn their lives around? Isn't he waiting patiently? Definitely is. Because while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is 8 souls, were saved through water. And so, references water. Now he's going to talk about baptism. It says there's also an antitype which now saves us, baptism. It's not the removal of the filth from the flesh, but the answer of a good conscience toward God. Pretty much for Sister Lana's back pocket there for her co-worker that thinks, or may not think that infant baptism is okay. And so he says, the answer of a good conscience toward God through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven and is at the right hand of God, angels and authority and powers having been made subject to him, waiting for his return, waiting to come back, waiting to put the powers that are on this earth in subjection as well. And so, God waited patiently while the ark was being prepared. As in the days of Noah, God is having patience with our generation as well. And however many generations out, he's going to have patience until one day, first raindrop, God split up the fountains of the deep, and that one raindrop hit, the very first raindrop that hit, a torrential downpour after that. And he says, this is the time. Until one day, he says, that's enough, I'm sending my son. And that's it. There's no more knocking on the door. There's no more, that door has been sealed. And that's it. And so, we need to find ourselves inside the church, inside that place of safety, just as those people were in the ark. So here in, let's go to 1 Peter chapter 4. Verse 1, and really, and I mentioned earlier, posed a question earlier saying, who were the spirits in prison? Well, in order to catch these people up, see, keep in mind that you have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and all the patriarchs, all the matriarchs, all the saints of old that were up until that point had gone to that place. And what Jesus did, and we're not talking about the ones that were in torment, right? We're talking about the ones that God had to, and I think even those ones that were in torment, come to think of it. But he's talking about Jesus going down there and preaching to these people, catching them up. This is what you missed. Oh, by the way, you could have done it in your lifetime because Noah did it. And he's saying, look, this is what happened. Jesus came to fulfill all of the prophecies. He came to fulfill everything that was written about him. And consequently, those people didn't know about it. But guess who did know about it? Adam looked for it. Eve looked for it. Seth looked for it. Moses looked for it. All of the people up until that point that were faithful in their generation saw this coming, saw that Jesus would come, had belief that he would come. And now he's preaching to them and saying, I know that you were faithful in your generation, now come with me. I'm going to take you back to you. You led captivity captive by taking them back to heaven where they are now. And so I don't believe that if you're faithful and you die today, that you go to that Sheol, that pit anymore. Jesus released those prisoners, and you're now with him in heaven. And so what we see here is that those other people are saying, like, in order to judge them fairly, Jesus had to preach himself to those people. Not that their fate isn't sealed, because it is. They have the same ability to believe or not during their lifetime, and the same decisions that everybody else had. But what he needed to do was, he needed to preach to them so that he could judge them along with everybody else and say, this is why I'm judging you, this is how I'm judging you. This mystery has been revealed that Jesus came, and I'm the measuring stick by which God is going to judge you. And that's why he had to preach to them for 3 days. And so, this good news in chapter 4, the same chapter, book, says, therefore, since Christ suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves also with the same mind. For he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh for the lusts of men, but for the will of God. And that's where we find ourselves today. For we have spent enough of our past lifetime in doing the will of the Gentiles, when we walked in lewdness and lust, drunkenness, revelries, drinking parties, and abominable idolatries. In regard to these, they think it strange that you do not run with them in the same flood of dissipation, and they speak evil of you. They will give an account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. For this reason, the gospel was preached also to those who were dead down there in Sheol, that they might be judged according to men in the flesh, but live according to God in the Spirit. So these people that were, and he says, in the days of Noah, right? Formerly were disobedient, and once the divine long-suffering waited in the days of Noah. So he's talking about how God had patience in the days of Noah, and he's having patience on our time as well. Our job isn't to worry about when Jesus is coming back the day in the end. Our job is just to be ready. Our job is to ready ourselves and to help each other to be ready as well. Let's go to 2 Peter chapter 2. Verse 1. It says, but there are also false prophets among the people, even as there will be false teachers among you, who will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the Lord who bought them, and bring on themselves swift destruction. and many will follow their destructive ways, because of whom the way of truth will be blasphemed. They say that 1 Peter deals with problems from the outside. 2 Peter deals with problems arising from the inside. So that's why he's saying, look, this is what's going to happen. There's going to be people that come in among you, and they try to persuade you this way, persuade you that way, teach you things that don't sound right, and all that. So he says, and many will follow their destructive ways, because of whom the way of truth will be blasphemed. By covetousness, they will exploit you with deceptive words. For a long time their judgment has not been idle, and their destruction does not slumber. Once again, he's about ready to talk about Noah. So he says, for if God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness, to be reserved for judgment, here we go, did not spare the ancient world, but saved Noah, one of 8 people, a creature of righteousness, bringing in the flood on the world of the ungodly, turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them to destruction, making them an example to those who afterward would live ungodly, and delivered the righteous Lot, who was oppressed by the filthy conduct of the wicked. For that righteous man dwelling among them tormented his righteous soul from day to day by seeing and hearing their lawless deeds. He says, then the Lord knows how to deliver the godly out of temptations, and to reserve the unjust under punishment for the day of judgment. What's he saying? He's saying, look at God's track record. The days of Noah. He let it slide for a while. He was patient. He brought judgment on those angels that disobeyed. They disobeyed. God has dealt with them. And he's saying, cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, they had their heyday. Then God dealt with them. He's saying, look, the pattern is there that God will end this in his time. And his patience, his level of patience, his long-suffering, all those things, that's up to him. We were living in Sodom and Gomorrah at the time that Lot was. We'd be like, Lord, when are you going to end this? When can I come into a better city? When are you going to deal with their wickedness? Well, that was up to God. He waited as long as he wanted to wait. And then he said, okay, it's done. In our generation, God's going to wait as long as he wants to wait. And then he's going to say, it's done. It's over with. So he says, leave that judgment up to God. Isn't that what he's saying? He said, the Lord knows how to deliver the godly out of temptations, and he knows how to reserve the unjust under punishment for their day of judgment. So let God handle this. But here's one thing that's for sure. He will handle it. Because then especially those who walk according to the flesh and the lust of uncleanness. These people despise authority. They're presumptuous. They're self-willed. They're not afraid to speak evil of dignitaries. Another word for dignitary would be glorious ones. So he says, whereas angels who are greater in power and might do not bring a reviling accusation against them before the Lord. Even the angels know that God's going to have everything under control. That this world, as long as we see it as wickedness and all the things that are bad, can't even turn on the news anymore or look at the news anymore on the internet without seeing some, disgusting things. It's just becoming a more wicked world. And when's God going to deal with these things? Put that in his hands. He'll deal with it. Our job is to ready ourselves and to talk about this with other people, ready ourselves and help each other in the body. But that's to me, that's the days of Noah. And we're really living in the days of Noah. And it's just going to get worse. So our world today has many similarities with the days of Noah. We have a large population. We have one language. There's violence. There's much evil thinking. There's much evil doing. But Jesus taught in this passage, Matthew 24, that man at large will simply be disinterested. But he also taught in this passage that man at large will simply be disinterested in the things of God, just going about his business as usual. But that's just as dangerous as being against God, thinking those evil thoughts. I'm just not even going to care about it. Just as dangerous. So just going about his business as usual, acting like everything will just keep on going. But as he warned his people time and time again, be watchful so that you aren't deceived. And so we need to be the ones that are watching. We need to be the ones that are warning. We need to be the ones that are, have our spiritual eyes tuned in, spiritual perception. And so Jesus said, so that you're not caught off guard. We don't want to be caught off guard. In our time of our life, we don't know. We can We've been given a handful of days, we don't know what those days are. Our job is just to be faithful within those amount of days, in every way that we can be faithful. And so, I think that we're there. I think that we're gonna get there even more, the days of Noah. Just interesting to kind of chase it down and say, what were those days like? What are they gonna be like? All I do know is that I don't think it's very much longer. Definitely not a date setter, but I do know that it's not gonna be too much longer. I see God wrapping this up. All right, that's all I have. Please stand.